Okay, so let's talk about neurodivergence, and that includes things like ADHD, autism, and people who identify as highly sensitive. There is a reason that I'm talking about this because these kinds of neurological types overlap very frequently with the complex chronic illnesses that I see every day in my practice, whether it is EDS or dysautonomia or MCAS or other kinds of autoimmunity. So let's understand this from an evolutionary perspective. I do believe that people do have certain temperaments or brain types or neurotypes that they are born with, and that this is a normal part of the beautiful neurological diversity of our species. I do not think it is a bad thing to be an ADHD or an autistic or highly sensitive brain type, and I don't think it is just a product of our modern society. I think them being disorders, so to speak, are products of our modern society, but I do think some people just do have these neurological types, and there is an evolutionary reason for it. Evolution always prioritizes diversity. If we have different people with different traits and different qualities, it is more likely that we are going to survive as a species and thrive as a community. We have people who have different strengths, different talents, who can make up in skills that other people lack, and who might see things from multiple different perspectives and be able to problem solve in a beneficial way for everybody. So I do think that a diversity of neurotypes would probably be selected for in an evolutionary context. People with ADHD, autism, or high sensitivities are going to have a lot of gifts or skills that they innately have that people without those neurotypes probably don't. You're going to be emotionally sensitive, and so you're going to be picking up on other people's emotional cues or social cues in a much more intensive way. Or on the other side in the spectrum, you might be so analytical, so detail-oriented, you don't pick up on the social cues or the emotional nuances of a situation, but you can see every finite detail of some phenomenon that other people might miss. You're going to be an outside-the-box thinker. If you have ADHD, you might not be very good with the details, but you can step back and say, the whole way we're going about this is wrong. We need to look at it from this angle, and you're going to be able to reveal something that no one else even picked up on. If you have high sensitivities, you may be a really good scout. You may be able to hear an enemy approaching from further away, or hear a stampede of a herd of animals that you are trying to hunt. You may tune into the differences in different microclimates, so you might be a really good forager of knowing exactly what plants are going to grow on this side of the hill versus this side of the hill. You might be able to read into someone's symptoms they're displaying and be a really good healer because you're listening in to the nuances of what they're describing. You can see different shifts in their color and maybe even smell differences in their body chemistry. There is so much about being highly sensitive that would be of benefit in an ancestral context. We need people who are warriors, and we need people who are sensitive healers to have a thriving society. So there are so many reasons why a diversity of neurotypes is important. And so that is why my goal is not to cure ADHD or cure autism or cure you from being a highly sensitive person. What I want to do is I want to help reduce the things that are exacerbating the negative aspects of these conditions as they play out in modern society. Because here's the thing, is that the things that are our strengths can also be our Achilles heel. And this is true for anyone. So for someone who has more of that tough warrior mentality, like people who fill more of that role in our society, if they become imbalanced, they will likely become more aggressive, more mean, and not work as well in groups, and they are going to have a lot of mental health problems in a different kind of scenario. People who have autism or ADHD or are highly sensitive, they're going to have their sensitivities get so extreme that they cannot function, that they have to wear sunglasses and noise canceling headphones, and avoid people because their sensory sensitivities are so extreme. People with ADHD may struggle so much with their executive function of knowing how to do a process step by step that they just give up and they are unable to function the way they need to in our society. A lot of people with autism have such extreme social difficulties, like they can't form or maintain relationships at all. They're difficult to interact with, or they may have tantrums or outbursts that are frightening to other people. So there are ways where these skills or these gifts can really be turned against us in the context of a modern society. And sometimes that is the traits that we kind of glorify, or the traits that we reward in our school and work systems, and the traits that we find problematic in our very rigid social construct of the kind of society that has been constructed around us. So for example, we would never have identified kids with ADHD in the same way in a traditional context where kids are outside running around all day. When we put kids in a schoolroom and have them sit and do very specific skills where everyone has to be doing the same thing, like everyone has to write, everyone has to do math, the kids whose brains don't do those things as well, just on a baseline level, are going to feel like they're inadequate and they're going to be punished for it, where kids whose brains do naturally work in that way are going to be rewarded. So some of it is like the traits that we see as better because of our very writing and math-based society, where in a traditional context the writing and the math are not going to even be things, at least in the same way, and there's going to be so many other skills that are going to be more prioritized. But some of it is also from our lifestyle, our modern lifestyle. So I'll talk more about that in a moment, but the key is that we want to optimize your brain. So we want it to function best as the neurotype that it is, and that means understanding the uniqueness of how your brain works, allowing yourself to really expand on those gifts and find the niche that you can play in society, the important niche, and reduce symptoms that feel really distressing, because there are those baseline neurotypes, but then often people will develop these other mental health conditions as a result of having this neurotype and not understanding it and not knowing what their role is in society, and maybe having been punished for thinking or behaving in that way through their life. So a lot of people with ADHD also have depression, or people with autism also have anxiety, and it's not because ADHD inherently comes with depression, or autism inherently comes with anxiety, but experiences they've had trying to navigate the world with that neurotype cause other mental health symptoms, because now the person with ADHD thinks that they just can't do anything because they failed in school, because they didn't have their neurotype accommodated, or people with autism have been traumatized with certain socializing expectations, or really feeling like they didn't fit in school, that they were awkward socially or something like that, and so then they get anxious. So we want to make sure we're optimizing your quality life and not just trying to squash your innate gifts. So some of that is going to be honoring that, if you struggle with socializing, you may not want to spend a whole weekend immersed in a overwhelming social setting. You may not want to go away for the weekend with a group of friends. You might do better in more shorter periods of time of interacting and engaging with people, and then having a social break. Someone with ADHD, you might do well not having cupboard doors on your closets or your storage areas, so that you can remember the things that you have. You remember the things that you need to keep track of. You might have a lot more lists around your house than an average person. So those kind of details that you wouldn't naturally remember so well, you can help accommodate for that. So some of it is going to be constructing your lifestyle in a way that honors your neurotype, and allows the strengths to come out, and doesn't cause you to be as overwhelmed as easily by expecting you to engage like everyone else does. But we also need to address the factors that are going to exacerbate your neurotype. So if we have these kinds of symptoms, we are going to have the negative aspect of those symptoms exacerbated when we have gut dysbiosis, nutrient deficiencies, or a high toxic load. And that is simply because those are the factors that modulate everyone's genetic predisposition in a negative way. So if you have a genetic predisposition for a certain neurotype, and then you accumulate a lot of mercury toxicity because your mom had mercury amalgams, and there's so many ways we can get this heavy amount of toxicity, guys. Basically, you lived in the Western world, right? And so you get this kind of toxicity that is going to upregulate the genes that are your specific predispositions, your specific mutations. So this is the same reason why some people might have the genes for a collagen disorder like EDS, but you see a range, you see a spectrum of severity of people actually developing those conditions. Some people have it so severely that they are barely functional, where other people are just a little bendy, and maybe they use that to their advantage, just being kind of more flexible people. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing these factors that modulate our genes, so we can modulate them to the best of our benefit, so we can get more of the gift end of things and less of the more detrimental factors. So the ADHD becomes, I am a really non-traditional, outside the box thinker, and not, I can literally never keep anything I have to do at any point, any day, straight. And I'm just constantly feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. So that's going to be, how ADHD can manifest in a much more extreme way when you don't have the proper lifestyle supports, and maybe you have lead toxicity in the brain, which has been associated with learning disorders. You have a major imbalance in the microbiome, which is affecting your dopamine production. You're not absorbing your amino acids properly, all of these factors. So this is why for these kind of conditions, when people come to me and they say, I have ADHD, or I have autism, or I'm super, super sensitive, I have super intense sensory sensitivities, I'm never going to tell that person, oh yeah, we can fully reverse that. Because I don't believe we can, and I don't believe we should. I like people to have differences. I want to have a diverse and beautiful and innovative society, and that's how we have that, by having people who are different and think different from each other. But I also want to reduce suffering. And if someone is coming to me and they're telling me that, my autism is getting in the way of my day-to-day functioning, I have, outbursts, I have tantrums that I feel like I cannot control, or my sensory sensitivities are so severe that I can barely leave my house, I can't go into stores or anything like that. That is negatively impacting your ability to contribute to our beautiful and diverse society. And so I am going to say, okay, let's look at your microbiome balance, let's look at your nutrient levels, let's look at your toxic load. And I'm going to implement some basic practices to help modulate those factors. So we're going to use something like the specific carbohydrate diet to help you rebalance your gut microbiome. We're going to help you reduce your toxic exposure in your day-to-day life and implement some basic detoxification strategies. And we are going to look at suspected nutrient deficiencies. We're going to make sure your diet is very nutrient dense, taking your sensory sensitivities into account, because I know a lot of people with these neurotypes will have trouble with taste and texture and things like that. So honestly, those tend to reduce once we start to rebalance the gut and lower our toxic load. But we will accommodate those in the beginning as much as we can, and help you slowly expand your diet as time goes on. So I just want to really emphasize this approach that we take, that it is not glorifying these conditions in their most dysfunctional presentations. I don't think that is a good thing or helpful either. If you are not functioning, there's something going on that is imbalanced that we can probably address and improve your quality of life. But we also don't want to act like these are all negative, that these are just, conditions, negative conditions that we need to get rid of. We need to honor that neurodiversity and improve your health simultaneously.